This is Khan, and this is the Wrath of Minis, and today we are going to be doing a slightly different video. We're actually going to be taking a model from start to finish. So after it's been made, and you've taken all the mold lines off, and you've glued it to its base, where do you go from there? How do you get going? And how do you bring it to completion? We're going to be using mostly basic techniques, and get to a point where we think it's like looking pretty sharp. So the model that we're going to be using today is going to be from the Imperial Guard's Death Korps of Krieg from the new Killteam box set. Well, not that new, but newish enough, you know. And I think it'll be a great model just to get, you know, that's pretty straightforward and simple and should be able to get some cool effects with it. As you can see here, we've completed the two models in terms of their construction, and they are now ready to be based, which we are going to utilize this earth texture acrylic stuff right here. We're just going to apply it to the base, get it all situated, let it dry, and then we're going to do a little bit of priming and Zenithal highlighting to make sure that we get our start, well, you know, on the right footing, okay? I like to use a metal tool if you've got one, but you can absolutely use a paintbrush and it will do the job. So we just go like that, get a scoop of it, and we'll just do this. If you want to make it smoother, you can put this in a little dish and add water, but sometimes that's not what I'm looking for. So just using the worst brush that I absolutely have, and then I'm just going to move around and make sure it gets everywhere. And part of it is I just don't want it to be on the model. All right, it makes a nice little effect, the dabbing of with a bit of water on your brush. It just means that it helps to even things out. But the brush motions of up and down create weird up and down textures, which I find nice. And it creates non-uniformity, which is a nice thing to have, I feel like. So this is our base currently. If you wanted to, sometimes you'd like to have a little mix of stuff that you could utilize, like this. Sometimes you want to use tweezers, or you could just dip them in, or you could take your hand like this and you could sprinkle some of this stuff, tend to be over the model, like so. So once we've gotten some down, I don't want to put too much because I don't think it needs it. I'm just going to make sure that the rocks are a little bit more seated, like so. Just so as it hardens, it's almost like a glue, like an adhesive. And that will do the trick, just like that. Boom. You can knock some off if it's got, you know. So now what we're going to do is just wait for them to dry. Okay, firstly I'm just going to get some surface primer, and I'm going to use some airbrush thinner. Generally I do I don't know, 3-to-1 kind of ratio with thinner to primer. Just depends on what kind of needle you've got with this, but if you're using an aerosol can, well, you don't have to worry about any of the ratio situation here. Okay, so you can see that this is a broken Winsor Newton. I don't care about it anymore, so this is a great brush for this purpose. Just take that and just go in and give it a good stir. You can see it's building up, and that's perfect. I don't want it to be super thick. I want it to be quite light because I really want control of it. Excellent, let's get to it then. And we're going to start here and just build this up slowly, never using too much of it, and we don't want to ever blast it really. We'll make sure we're moving it around. But luckily I put enough thinner in that there should be no problem even if I do go a little crazy with it. So yeah, we're just trying to capture all the angles, especially the shadows. I just need to let this dry for a moment before I start to touch them. So yeah, that's really about it. So I'm going to use some Liquitex acrylic titanium white ink, which I really like to utilize for zenithaling. It's a very light spray. It's also super fluid, so it pretty much works right out with the airbrush immediately, and I don't even have to thin it. Though occasionally I like to add 1 drop of thinner just to make sure that it doesn't actually dry on the needle. So I'm going to put 1 drop of ink of thinner in, and give it a good old stir. Excellent, and we should be good to go. Pretty good. The back side. You can keep going in subsequent layers to try to keep building it to make it even brighter, depending on how far you want to go. I'm actually going to go keep these pretty dark, so I'm actually doing this more to show you guys what it looks like, how it functions, and how it looks. And you can see all these lovely gradients that exist there, and how it really, everything on this model is really popped and really shows up, which is a really nice kind of effect. It just helps you see, maybe even visualize more of what the miniature will look like once it is done. Great. I'm going to go to another model and let that dry. Okay, everyone. So I'm going to be painting this Death Korps of Krieg model here. I think it's got a bionic arm and stuff like that, so it looks pretty cool. I'm going to go for a pretty straightforward, simple means of painting, where I'm just not going to get overly complex, hopefully, but I'm going to utilize a bunch of just classic techniques that are straightforward, beginner friendly, and hopefully will make a pretty cool model. I'm going to be utilizing the Scale Color Artist Series heavy body acrylic paint. Obviously, you should just use your own paint that you've got. You don't need to go out and specifically get these things, but they are there. There are some cool colors, though, that I like, which I'm going to be using, which you may not have means to, which will be a green gray, brown, a dark brown ochre, and a pearl gray. Partly, I'm looking for a slightly dark, kind of affected model, something that, you know, that kind of instills or is inspired by what Death Korps of Krieg feel like, you know, like these World War II style models that have grit and determination, and obviously have gone through all the nasty wars that is. And so this is a model here, which I've painted. I'm going for a sort of semi-desaturated but dark look, and I'm using the ground as a means of getting some vibrancy or some power out of it so they stand out, even though they're kind of dark or blackish models. And I will be utilizing some actual metallic paints in this, which will be these three here from Pro Acrylic. I must say that these are the only metallic paints that I own at the moment, so this is what I've got to work with. And we're going to do some cool things, hopefully, with this. I'm just going to work with some base coating. I'm going to be using this Squidmar MK1 Tobolowsky one, and I'm using a large brush. Actually, this is a size 1, so yeah, I guess this is a size 1 brush. This is rather than using straight black. I don't want to use straight black too much because it's not that it's super difficult to work with, but I just want more variation in the tones. So that's a nice color. I like what that's doing. Let's just feather out some of these colors, see what we're working with. This is a sort of a gray that I'm working with, which I will be utilizing to blend between a lot of these colors, because I don't want to go straight to whites a lot of the time unless I'm trying to pull off my final highlights. And blacks are just to help me desaturate any of these colors if they're not working quite right for me. So I've just sort of picked a few colors, not fully knowing if they're going to be exactly what I want. But sometimes in the world you don't know what you want, and you get there anyway. We've thinned our paints. You can kind of see because of how translucent it is now at this point in time, and it's very thin. So we want to make the Zenithal highlight work for us rather than it work against us or make it pointless. So let's just start here, and you can just see what happens. Now, I really don't need to be very careful, I have to say. So if I look like I'm being careful, probably because I am, but I shouldn't be. Add a bit more paint because it's quite light. But let's start here in the back, and you can kind of see that it's kind of got like this nice bluishy kind of green effect, which I think works well. So you're going to find out that I didn't glue this backpack on. Luckily, I didn't need to. And again, more thinning. So this is a lot of light right here. Let's see what happens. Okay. So one of the things I'm just kind of quickly doing is I'm pulling away from this knee a little bit, because that's where I'm going to have it be brighter rather than not. So I'm just trying to make the Zenithal be more efficient rather than inefficient. And hopefully you can get a sense about how thinly I am working with these paints. Now, if you don't have this color, you can obviously mix a bit of blue, a bit of green, maybe probably green and a greeny blue and black together, and you can probably create this tone. So one of the key pieces here is that remember where my brush ends up is where the pigment will be the most. Excellent. All right. I think the jacket is mostly done. Let's work with some browns. So I'm going to take this very dark brown. I'm going to take some of this brown. I'm going to mix these two together. See where I get. And let's just do all the areas that we need to put brown on. So firstly, we'll start with the boots. So what you can see that I'm doing is that I'm just moving around from one place to another, and then I'm letting the first place dry, and then I'll come back to it and just to see if it needs a secondary coat. So right here, we're going to tackle this section. Where else is there brown that I want to be using? Right up in here. Even though this brush continuously serpents on me, which I mean like it becomes like a double fork, it still holds a sharp tip for the most part, and this is where you want a sharp tip because we're trying to get into the recesses. Well, let's start with just by slotting it back on for a second, getting a bit more of this dark brown, and we're just going to be liberal. It doesn't really matter because it's pretty thin. We get pretty good coverage. Remember, if you want it to be a bit more coverage, or you want to get it into the recesses, just add a bit more water, and you can come back to it and paint another coat, and it should be pretty solid. All right, I'm going to wait for this to dry. I'm going to take the backpack off, and then I'm going to get to the recesses of this. So you can kind of see why there are good reasons about why you might want to not glue everything. Oh man, I totally missed the most obvious thing to paint that was brown. Well, maybe it's not the most obvious, but this thing in front of him here, whatever this thing is, it's like a little box with a dial. Maybe it's his life monitor. All right, so parts of his shoes need to be adjusted. Go back to them. Looking pretty good. Okay. All right, let's get to this weird dark purple ochre color. I'm going to hit the legs. This to be mostly white. I'm going to just touch his eyes for a second. I'm not really painting, I'm just sort of prepping. If we understand that there's transparencies in paints, that we are, and if you're looking for a vibrant color, one of the things we need to be aware of is having a brighter undercoat, which will impact the color that's going to go on top of it. So I'm just painting them white because I want them to be the most vibrant when I place the next layer on top of it. Oh no, you know what I need to do? Gloves. He's got one glove and one glove, so I'm going to go back to this brown again, that's mix that I've made, and I'm going to, ooh, that's not it. Right there is his glove. He's got like a piece of metal or something. Great. Starting to come together. Oh yeah. So I'm going to take this dark green gray thing and add a tiny bit of black. And I'm going to make the gun out of this. So I want the gun to be more black than his cloak. Partly when we paint, we want to paint in the more recessed areas first rather than the exterior, because we're more likely to paint over the top of things if we do it the other way around. And if we don't get even coverage, remember, we just go back over the top of it and we will make it even later. This is just a base coat, and so we are just working with making it get to the right color, or the color we want it to start with. But yeah, you can see that it's coming along. It's starting to look more black. I just want it for it to dry, and then I'll catch that again later. I'm going to take this black, I'll just go like that. I'm going to take some of this dark maroon brown, ochre, mix that, and I think I'm going to make these his trousers. So you can kind of see that I'm keeping a lot of the tones very similar to each other. Sometimes I just add a little water. I'll start in the dark. I want the appearance of black without it necessarily having to be black, if that makes any sense. Alright, going back to the black mix, because I'm going to paint this gun again, because you can see there's a bit of like white or like grey appearing out of it, and I don't want that to be the case. Partly because I'm going to paint it silver, a good chunk of it. Alright, we'll just wait for that to dry. Okay, backpack on a stick. Sometimes it works to have it like that. Okay, cool. I'm gonna let that dry. Put that off to the side. Come back to here. Let's get to the metallic bits. Dark silver. Now, if you don't have a dark silver, then I would recommend utilizing taking this color and then using another dark color and mixing the two together. There you go, there's some dark silver for you guys. Okay, so I did a little mix of the green gray that I was using and put it into the armor. I'm going to use this as the main color. I cannot tell if this is if it's his armor or if it's, I think it's his sleeve actually. I think that's his sleeve. You know, I couldn't tell quite what it was at first, but I think I see it now. If everything's looking a little the same, we're going to hopefully fix that in the next pass. Where next? Helmet. Helmet, helmet. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. His like jacket goes over his bionic arm. And I was like, what is this bit here I'm looking at? But too dark. That's kind of the idea of feathering, weirdly. Well, it's not really feathering it to another area, I'm just feathering it out away from it. And I'm going to take some additional white, and I'm going to plop it right in here. Cool. Looking pretty good. Now, I don't actually know what colors I'm going to paint these yet, and I need to look at some emblems to determine what color, so I'm going to hold that off for a moment. I'm going to take a little bit of silver, just catch the top of this, what looks like to be like a transmitter or some sort of thing. And then one last piece before we do the mask is the bright gold. Ah, see? Didn't shake that well enough. You can see there's a lot of medium surrounding this gold, which means that it wasn't shooken well enough. It's not a big problem, it's just a thing. You really want a good mix. Boom, something like that. I will mix it together in a second. Great. That'll do the trick. You can see there's a lot of glitter inside the water. And if I was painting a display piece or some other piece that was more that had to be careful with about how the paint was going down, I would definitely not be mixing paint pot waters with metallics and solid colors or other colors. Grab some gold. Did I pick the right gold? Oh, I took the wrong gold. Ah, okay. Wrong gold, people. Wrong gold. Alright, we're doing... So this is why you definitely need a brush that can be sharp. Ooh, I'm going to do this section here. I assume some of these gold bits should be gold because he's won some awards, right? Coming out pretty well. Let's just take this. We want to pick out any cool details. And if you go over the lines, we can always go back as well and touch up on things. So it's not like the end of the world. So let's go back to this and not that the backpack's not important, but because I can just be a little bit more free with it. I don't have to feel like I have to cover every little bit. I've already got a good base coat, and so any part that's not painted is just going to have that dark brown underneath it, which will perfectly do as like a good undercoat, if that makes any sense. And so that's looking like a good backpack at the moment. Obviously I'll brighten it up and add additional highlights, but let's say if I take this gold here, he's obviously got a tiny little skull right here. Now this is probably a bit too early for this backpack for me to be painting this gold bit, but at least you can see it's a tiny detail that when you look at it later it'll be like, oh, that's nice. Excellent. And I think besides these metal bits, which I can do later, the base coat for practically all of this stuff is done. I can start working with the highlights or the midtones and highlights and things like that. And because of the Zenithal undercoat, I have a little bit of already, I have midtones. I have different tonalities that exist in the model. So really it's going to get down to painting different parts of it silver, like some of the gun stuff, and dialing up a bunch of the details. So part of those details that we're going to be punching up will be his backpack, making sure any parts that I somehow magically missed I get, and then dealing with an idea that there's got some light that's coming from this way. So this is just all base coating, and you can kind of see that just with base coating I have a pretty effective looking model. Maybe I'll try and dial this thing in first so we get a sense of what it looks like, and maybe people would be like, oh, I would be happy with that, and you'd be like, and if you would be happy with that, that's great. All right, so I'm gonna get this. I got some green here. This is an olive green. You know, you might find this like on a more like army, maybe like an army green, I feel like an army camo. I'm just picking some stuff out, and the only thing that I'm really going to have green here is this barrel that sits in this down here below. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's like a ration thing, or maybe it's his bedroll. It's just good to create little visual distinction pieces like that, and I'm obviously going to take a couple coats higher on that just to make sure it's got the appropriate level. So let's just say if I go like that, I don't know what my words were there, but they were something. Like tonalities, I guess. Boom. I think it looks, you know, it's starting to take shape. And I'm going to paint this the eagle gold as well later, but it was just going to be impossible to keep painting everything whilst getting that done. So likely the gold on his backpack will have to be redone because I'm going to go over it. So with that being done, I'll move this to the side and go back to the main model, main man. Whew, where are we? So gun barrel. I gotta paint the gun barrel silver now. Let's work on this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab the same dark silver that I've been working with, and I could mix it, just see how it goes. And we're gonna start here. I'm just gonna paint all around. I think that's where I'm gonna stop. Like that. Boom. That's looking pretty good. You know, there are a couple little spots like this thing, whatever that thing is. It's like a safety trigger. And excellent. New color, burnt sienna. I'm gonna just put this down here. So it's quite a red, quite a reddish brown. I'm also then going to take a yellow ochre. Completely unrelated, but if I was doing a non-metallic gold, that would be a pretty good yellow to work from. So this here is me going to start working on the leather. And the reason why I'm going to do the leather is because some of it's quite deep and I don't want to have to go back over it once I'm done. So I'm going to take some of this brown, mix it here in the center, add a tiny bit of water, maybe get a bit more, because this is going to be my most major sort of mid-tone highlight. Take some of the red and just straight mix it until I kind of get, so it's like a 50-50 blend. Okay, tiny bit more water, just make sure it's appropriately thinned. Twist that brush, remove excess paint, I really don't. Okay, let's have a look, see how that looks. Sometimes you need to check a model. So I'm going to just start with the back here. Okay, I need to make it just a tiny bit thinner because it's getting locked up on my brush fractionally. Okay, sort of working. Let's see what down here. Great. It's got gloves. So this is probably the area that I need to get a little work on. Okay, all of those browns are starting to be just a bit stronger, which is what we're looking for, but not overly strong. Now the boots, we don't need to be really particularly careful at all. Now it might look quite strong once you put the paint on it, but as it dries up, it darkens. And the redness that we've just applied to it just gives it a nice additional bit of richness to the model. Obviously we're going to cover a lot of that, but not all of it, with some yellows. So we're going to take this yellow here. Oh, I will have to go to the backpack at some point. Let's go to the backpack. Because I'm painting it such a thin coat that even if I'm not particularly clean with my paintbrush work, which actually I don't want to be particularly clean, I'm trying to make a little erratic, because then it makes for more interesting, it's like stippling. I'm also using it as a way to catch the edges as well. I'm not being I'm being carefree, which I like. And if I keep doing this kind of work and I keep bringing up different color lights, like if I add more yellow to it, it's going to really show itself very quickly. We're going to take this yellow ochre, and mix it in with our other sort of mid-tone color that we're working. So this is kind of like our first real major highlight. Now it's nice because if you ever mess up entirely, you have the colors at your disposal to work backwards. So you can go, oh, okay, I know what my base color is. I bring those two together. Oh, now here's my mid-tone. Boom, I'll put the red back in. I'm going to go my highlight. And so you have all of your colors here. This is the wonderful thing about having a wet palette. And especially like making little blending sections. It just means that you have that paint available to go back. And it's very useful if you're like making glazes and various elements, or if you just mess up, and who doesn't mess up? And so this is where I'm going to get the most erratic with my paintbrush, perhaps, and just start trying to create little more like textural things. You may think this is unnecessary. For me, I like to try and create like a little bit more realism. It's also worth noting that it's always worth doing a test model before you start getting real crazy into a color scheme. I'm just working like that. You can kind of see, and I've created like a little bit of a yellow, kind of like not polka dotted, but stippled effect into the leather here. Hopefully it stands out just enough to give it some element of wear and use. So like right up here, this is a hard spot. So that's mostly done. Now I'm just going to tackle the shoes a little. The shoes don't really matter. Sorry, the reason why it's not going to be important for shoes is actually no one really looks there. Like your eyes don't naturally go towards shoes, especially in models. Your main attention will be right here. But we're also going to be utilizing a pigment powder, which you may not own, but it's a great way of bringing your model and your base together, and a cheap and effective way, so it can be really cost effective to make your model look really cool without having to really do anything. So it's one of those like neat tools at your disposal that adds vibrancy and life to a model. Okay, where do we go next? Now we go to this yellow that we had. This is where it's going to be more evident my stippling pattern technique. Ready, people? Ready. Ready, Con. You might think it's very subtle, and it is at the moment, but trust me, the more we build this up, the more prevalent and powerful the effect will become. And I'm also not painting with very thick layers. This is quite thin, the paint. Bit of that. And then again, we're going to go back into it again. And stippling is a wonderful effect, because you can create... And the pros use it like all the time. Because they like want to create erratic. They want to make the feeling that it's lifelike, and the way you do that is by creating erraticness in your strokes. And as you build it up, it becomes a bit more yellow. And as it becomes a bit more yellow, and you've got all of those other colors like the brown, the dark browns, the dark reds that we have in there, those colors help all come together to make it feel more cohesive. I mean, I'm just going to keep going a little with it, because now I'm kind of mixing straight yellow here. I'm not even mixing it, I'm going to straight yellow because it's the natural place to go. Okay, that's some edge highlighting. Not much, but some. I edge highlight by stippling a lot, but I use the side of my brush to stipple when it comes to edge highlighting, so it breaks up the monotonousness of what can happen when you just do a straight line across something. A little bit more to it. Just going to take this, I'm going to take a bit of yellow. So instead of adding white to this mix, I'm just adding yellow, because yellow is a fair bit brighter. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to paint this part of the backpack. I'm looking to keep it kind of, make it feel dark, you know? And I'll paint them brighter as I go. It's looking pretty good. That backpack, you could be like, oh, I'm kind of done with it. There's a few brighter spots that I'm going to take it in a few little key areas, just to make it feel like it's just a bit more to it. But that's, you know, that's a nice looking backpack, I think. And that's, you know, how much time and effort do you want to spend on a backpack? The answer is all the time in the world. All right, let's get back to the model at hand. What do we want to touch up on now? His cloak. Okay, so this is a color of this green gray with this pearl gray color. I'm just using this gray as an intermediate color between white. So I don't want to jump straight to white. I'm just trying to jump to something else that will give me a desaturated look, without going straight to white. The faster you jump to white, the harder it is to control. So let me just do a little edge highlight here to see what this looks like. I'm going to pick out a spot on his cloak, like this bit here. It seems like a good color, so let me just take a bit more of that, add a bit more water. I want to keep this pretty thin. I actually want this to be fairly transparent, but I don't really want it to be like a wash, and I don't really want it to be a glaze. Let's find out the first area right here, this line here. I'm going to just take this. Boom. Okay, and I'm going to take this one here. So for me, I'm just thinking how like the light might shine on it, and I'm just trying to pick it out. Okay, seems okay. What about here? Great. So what's nice about what I've just done, and you may go, oh, Khan, you didn't do anything, is actually, I don't want it to look like I've done a lot, if that makes any sense, because I want it to blend in nicely, and part of that is making sure I've got the right consistency with the paint. Because if I get the right consistency down, then everything looks pretty seamless. And that's what I'm hunting for. Now the back of him, I think we're going to really avoid it. We don't need to tackle it. It's not important. We are just trying to make sure that things are relatively defined. So like this little thing here, just paint the circle, maybe add a little stipple, just so it fills out the space a fraction, but still shows as being the color we want it to be. I'm just going to edge highlight this one more time, make sure it's fully. There's like little creases. We can do our help it by filling out those creases like right there. We can even tackle the bottom of it if we like. It's pretty good. So the piece I need to capture is this edge and this edge here. So I have to flip this upside down because it's very tricky otherwise. Like that. And I could do this. I could kind of like stipple a bit. And if I stipple, what I like about this idea is that it breaks it up a fraction in a different way. And you may feel like these layers here, like you would like to just jump straight to the conclusion, but the more that I do it and the more gradual I build up the layers, the more seamless things feel, and the better, the more cohesive everything looks, and everything just looks sharper. So I have to go around everywhere else now. So let's say I go here, like this guy's arm here. So firstly, I'm kind of firstly making the general sense of the edge highlight. Great. And I gotta do his belt. And then I'm going to take it up a stage brighter than this in certain places. We know there might be a bit of light here, so I'm just going to fill it. Looking pretty good. And then this guy here, I realize is this arm, and the problem I've got is I've got an undercoat of metal, which makes it look metallic. And I don't want that, so I'm going to have to do a bit more vigorous coloring. I'm going to time to take out one more stage of brightness. Okay, so I could immediately jump to this. I really don't want to. I want to be more careful with it. This should be a stage brighter then, and now I need to make it sure that I'm painting even less in the space that I had set up. So that is significantly brighter, which means I should be significantly more careful. Cool. And let's pick out this legging section here again. Let's see where this looks like. Okay, yeah, so what I'm doing here, now I'm sort of getting into more textural things, but I'm also building up gradients. So gradients obviously can be tricky, and they can be time consuming actually. They're not necessarily the hardest thing in the world to do, but they can be time consuming. And I'm doing it because I'm thinking about this source light that's kind of coming from the camera angle directly down on him. So this bit here will be more brighter than the rest of it. But I need to paint some of these things to make it feel like that. And I find that even if I go too bright, it's easier to make things darker than it is to make things brighter. So I don't mind getting too bright because I can always work backwards. And this is part of the thing about when it comes to painting, learning to work with both things, or learning to not necessarily fix a mistake, but to learn to operate in different ways. Right here, instead of dragging my brush, I'm like lightly tapping along it, and I'm just not catching all of those places. So it totally works like an edge highlight. But what it does is it breaks the edge highlight up, because edge highlighting actually looks really strange when you do it in like really, when it's the same tonality, especially. Okay, and then we're just gonna go like that. Okay, so now that I think we've done the cloak. I don't really want to take it any higher than this in terms of its volume. I'm really, I'm just trying to show you some cool little things, little techniques, just the ideas about what you can do to like make it more interesting. But what I have to work to now is I have to work on some of the metallicness. So I'm going to work on his helmet, his shoulder pads, and his arm. And because of this, I need to take a little time to do the same thing. So I'm just building up the volume here. I'm also going to build the volume here and here and here. I will then go back to the gun at a later date. I also will be tackling his knee and these like bands, but they're not bands, they're probably like wraps around his ankles. And that's really, and then we're going to tackle his eyes, obviously this piece here, and then I have to look at some colors about what the best colors will be for here. So probably blue here, a nice red on this one, and then maybe a two-tone on that one. But I have to look at it. And you'd be like, does someone actually paint a whole army like this? And the answer is probably not. But if you're going to paint an army, then I would really recommend getting an airbrush and airbrushing a majority of the work, so you don't have to go through this sort of like building up process. But of course, there's another way, a cheaper and easier way of doing it rather than this, which you can do by stippling. Now, commonly, you would not be using white gold as your jump in the silver. You'd be using a brighter silver, and you'd be like, Khan, what's going on here with this? But I kind of prefer this color. And if at worst case scenario, I can just mix the dark gray and this white gold together and create the effect. So if I just take this, like over here, and then take that and blend these two together, boom, I've created my silver. Now this might be not enough, because I don't really want to be doing this forever, so I'm just gonna like that. Let's see what that's like. Just pulling out the stuff out of my brush, go like that. So again, we're building up volumes. Bang. There you go. And you can kind of see, I totally avoided the back and just did it here. I could do a little bit on the back, but I really want to be much more careful with it, much more sparing. Like only draw little lines, little dots. Think of it as like little reflections, little pot marks, little effects for damage, but nothing more. Boom. I'm gonna go for more silver. I don't want it to be quite this dark, because the darker it is, the more the layers I have to build. Again, so the idea is this area right here is where the light is kind of coming from. And so on this side of it, where I'm gonna practically avoid it. Boom. So now we have created a gradient. It's it's not perfect, but we don't need it to be perfect. We're just sort of stippling this kind of slightly brighter effect. And if we want to make it brighter, which it could be worthwhile doing to really make it pop because it is metallic, we'll take this color and add a little gold. I mean, sorry. Woo! We'll take this color and add a little white. Because what's gold going to do for us? So we just take there, boom. Again, we're defining all these areas. Almost done. What's next though, besides the mask and that piece of the puzzle? Gun barrel, or the gun. So I'm gonna take some black. Gonna take a little bit of white and really create a cold gray. It's not very cold actually, it's just a regular gray. Add a bit of water. This might be too dark, but if it is, I'll come back. Let's have a look. Firstly, we're just going to tackle this section here. Let's see what it looks like. Too dark. Bump. White. Again, I'm just going to run it like that. Cross it. Catching some of the raised edges like that, and just doing like that. So it kind of makes it look a bit more gray, but this is okay because what we're going to do is we're going to punch it up a little by adding even more white. Again, as we get brighter, more careful. So this is where I'm going to get a little like yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Okay. Practically done. Just take a tiny bit of green, just do a little this and see what this does. Didn't like that, let's try that again. I could almost say it's practically done. Eyes, face mask, medals, backpack. Mask, I'm going to take the brown that I've been working with, and I'm going to take this purple and mix the two. And then we're going to just paint his mask in this color. And if it's too brown, I will reduce it and add a little bit of additional color to it. Okay, let me take a bit of that. Take a bit of black, because I want it to be more dark than anything. And we're just gonna get in there. Okay, now you might think, what the hell's happening here? I shall show you. I'm gonna use some red. You do not have to use an ink. You can absolutely use another red, but find the most vibrant red you got. So I'm going to work with quite a thin color. I really don't even need nearly as much as this. So I'm just going to go like that. Bump. And then I'm going to just check what that looks like. And then I'm going to go here. And then I'm going to go... And I'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to make it stronger and more powerful. But I'm just going to build it up rather than straight paint it, if that makes any sense. Okay, that eye looks a bit strange. I'll have to fix it once it's dried. Take that. Right in here. Mix some brown. Seems good. Gives me a dark brown. You don't need inks. I like them in there because they're like very strong, vibrant colors of aqua-y kind of color. And I'm just gonna whack this central section. Boom. That's not quite as vibrant as I would put it, so let's say I take this blue again. I'm gonna go back here. Yep. Again, take this red. Last piece of the puzzle. Let's just take a tiny bit of white. I need an off-white, like this reddish color here. This is a little tricky. Kind of works. Yeah, kind of works. Almost there, almost there. I've got a couple of tiny little things I can do to make it... I need to make the eyes pop a little bit more, so I'm going to have to go a bit more white. I need it to still be this thing. I need to just take it like this. I don't want to make sure... I don't want to cover up everything. It needs to be a little bit of that red still showing. Otherwise it won't read as red. And if I can just capture something of that nature, it's looking pretty good. I can spend a little bit more time on it. Okay. My brush is not... Oof, it's close. It's not great, but it's you know. Next last piece. Actually, I can take some silver, mix this bit. Let's pluck out some details. All right, see all these buttons? Boom. Why can't I see that? Oh, it's like my eyes went cross-eyed for a second. All right, I should definitely go the absolute brightest color here rather than even messing around with a mid-tone. Okay. What about... So I'm just using the side of my brush for any of these little... Just picking out all of the rivets. You know, every little bit helps to make it feel like it's a done model rather than feeling like something was... So I'm going to take this dark brown mixture here, mix the two together, like so, and then I'm just going to effectively use a lot of water to kind of create like a wash and stipple in a certain sense, but it's not really stippling, but kind of am pushing the paint into the cracks and crevices of this model. Obviously, we're to be careful. We don't want to undo all the good work we've done. Okay, that's dry enough. Next step, people. Okay, boom. This and this. You don't need... This is just a red, but there's lots of different colors out there that you can get. And depending on what kind of world and terrain you're looking to create, you can get different kinds of pigments that are all different types of colors. For this particular model, though, we're going to go for a more Martian red color. Let's have a look. A bit more brown in its tone. dark brown could work. Maybe I'll come back to that. And kind of like a gray, gray. Okay, let's start with the main color that I was going to use, this one. Yeah, so this stuff you got to be careful with. This stuff gets everywhere. So just get the worst brush you got. Get something like this. And then just start to dapple it in. You can always knock it off. Effectively, you're pushing in the pigment into the ground, like so. And we also don't mind if we do a little bit of this by adding it into like the feet. So just grab the excess. You know, and then it's a great way of turning, of connecting your base to your model without having to really do anything. But luckily all the work that we've previously done stays there. Add a little to the backpack, because why not? I'm sure he set it down a few times. And we could put it like on his elbow. Maybe he's been like rummaging around. So we just add a little bit to it. Now, that's what I would say is done. There's a couple things about pigment. Pigment is, obviously it's not permanent because we haven't actually glued it into place. It's very strong, it's very vibrant, which is very nice. Most of the time, you don't really need to worry about pigment coming off. It tends not to. However, if your fingers touch it, it will. So, because you grab a model mostly from the top, I would then advise not putting pigment directly down from that side because you'll be picking it up like here. But like if I put my thumb into this or my finger into this, this will be removed. So if you want to absolutely make sure it doesn't come up, then you need to affix it to it. And there are two ways. You can do pigment fixer, or you can just varnish the model. I would just do the varnishing model bit, because why add pigment fixer to something when you can just varnish the entire model, make it strong and solid, and then it'll be there permanently until the end of time. I mean, end of time is a bit of a unlikely situation, but you know what I'm saying. So something along the lines of that. And yeah, I think that's really about it for this model. We can continue to keep working on it if we really want to. But that's kind of the thing about painting. It depends on how far you, as a painter, want to go with your work. And you can keep going, and you could just keep on going. For instance, if we were to really look into this model, I could do some weathering, like oil weathering or something like that, to clearly define certain sections. Or I could add a little bit more highlights to the backpack. I could differentiate this controller from his hand a bit more. I can make sure that I put more detail onto his medals. You can keep going. And you can see how many, like if I kept doing additional highlights, I could keep putting additional highlights right here to really make it stand out. Or I could add some colors into the gold section to give them, variation or differentiate them from each other. I can also, you could start glazing a model. I wouldn't put it on, you do it before you start basing it because you get complications. But if I started glazing it, I could add more darkness to different areas, or I can change some of the color temperatures by glazing in different colors to make the model, more interesting. And that's something you probably would do to display models or things that you really want to put some time and effort into. But it is worthwhile practicing some of these skill sets on lesser models, because as you build up your skills, you can do more interesting things at a later date. I just continue to work on the eyes a little bit. It's a little tricky actually working on these things. And And it's funny because it's not even like drawing an eye, it's just like trying to create like a little light OSL. So I just solidly blocked red here on each of these and then just added a tiny little highlight underneath it to give it the sense that there was like light shining out from them. But that's really about it. And it looks pretty good. I think pretty good for a tabletop war game model. You know? Nothing crazy, but generally pretty sharp. There's so much more that you can do with this model than what I fully showed. You can continue to push the highlights and help change and increase the contrast on your model, which will in turn make your models look better, because the higher your contrasts are, or the more from darkness to light, really helps to make the mood and set the way that the model looks to our eye. But hopefully what you gathered was that I employed a bunch of little different techniques that I've talked about and just applied them to this model in a variety of different ways. And hopefully it shows you that kind of what I did is sort of the path. There are many different ways to get to the end, but different little techniques that I employed to make this model look cool or have a cool aesthetic or feel to it. Obviously, the more effort you put into it, the better the end product can be. And so when you're doing high-level display models, people can spend not just weeks, but months trying to get it to this, phenomenal level. And for many of us who are doing like wargaming or, tabletop stuff, then you don't really want to put quite as much effort into it. But understanding how much time and effort it requires to make it look like the things that you see on Instagram and various stuff like that there's a lot of work in it. And there's a lot of work to building up to get to a point where you can not only just produce it, but then produce it at a fast and efficient level. And there's lots of different tools that we can do, but hopefully you got to see at least a way of thinking about things and what you can do to improve your models as you go along. This is the Death Korps of Krieg model. I'm hoping going to do a squad of them for our kill team, so I might spend a little more additional time just fine-tuning some things, and obviously I'm going to put a varnish on them. But yeah, I think that's about covers it. If you want to, deep dive into any of the specific things that I sort of talk about or showing, we've got the basic series, which kind of covers pretty much the majority of most beginner things out there, which will hopefully give you a good understanding about what was just happened here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found it informative. If you guys enjoyed this or you thought it was interesting, hopefully I can do some more and show you guys more or additional things that are out there as well. If you did, please subscribe or like the video. And if there's things that you're interested in or weren't fully sure on, drop a comment and I will get back to you, and hopefully we can, improve all together.